of the podcast. So now, as you read the title for the episode, well, you're actually correct by reading that. So anyway, so what the podcast is actually about is, it's about where I talk about all types of different strange things, like such as, a bad, how would I say this? Basically, where I talk about uh, um, basically an educated mentor figure person, and about some type of. I also talk about paranormal experiences that I have had, in the alien encounter abduction experience that I have actually also have had. So anyway, yeah, that's something else that I talk about, those type of things on here. So that's actually what I actually mostly talk about on the podcast, and that's honestly what the podcast is actually about. Of course, so now, like I said, if anyone has anything about an experience similar to that they may have been through before, just let me know, and I would love to hear about it. So, anyway, if you actually want to be on the podcast, that's actually not a problem at all, because all you have to do is just actually send an email about that, and you could actually be on the podcast. So the name of the podcast is Blast of Strangeness. So that's the name of the podcast. So I figured, you know what? Podcast time to film. So anyway, also welcome to the live stream if you're new around here. So that, like I said, that is the name of the live stream, or the podcast name, that's actually being recorded in real time. And so also be sure to subscribe to my channel, and watch my content on my YouTube. But like I said, if anyone is actually interested in actually being on the podcast, that's actually not a problem at all. You just have to email the podcast for that. So you're probably wondering, why don't you have any silent guests on tonight or for your podcast? Well, this episode, there are no silent guests in this episode. So, that's odd. I know, right? That's odd. Here I thought there'd be views for the public, or for anyone to watch. Well, apparently people must not be interested anymore. Damn. Oh, okay. Well, whatever. It's fine. Here it's a live stream for a podcast, and there's no one. Seriously? Wow. That's horrible. Here I take the time to do this, and then this is what ends up happening. You've got to be kidding me. So, about last week, if anyone's wondering, the thing behind me, just look up. You'll see. So now, anyway. So now, this episode is actually about paranormal experiences that I have had before. So I have lived in several different places throughout the years, and please pay no attention to that wire. Please. That's actually for this right here. Anyway, so I lived in several different places, and there was about, I want to say, I think one that wasn't actually haunted out of all of them, out of all the others. But of course, all the others were. So, actually, no, actually, no, there was two that were not actually haunted, which is actually hard to believe. So, so anyway, the one place that I had lived was actually haunted, but I had lived there for like a long time, for like several years. So the day this one place we had moved into, so we pulled in the driveway one day, to move in, so we start unpacking our car, we move in, we walk in, all of a sudden, we walk in, we turn the lights on, it's, it's during the day. So I was like, all right, you know what, let's just get the lights turned on. We'll go from there. So we turn them on. And even with those lights on, for some reason, it was still dark in there. And I said to myself, how could it still be dark in here during the day, even with lights on? Okay, that's odd. Now, I thought that was odd and very strange. So then, all of a sudden, next thing you know, lo and behold, I thought, okay, all right, whatever, no big deal. I didn't pay any attention to it at first, And then, all of a sudden, so things were okay slightly after that. And I was just like, oh, okay, maybe that's just the way the place is, So then, all of a sudden, next thing you know, out of nowhere, a few years later, after living there, for some reason, this place had this very strange issue. It was actually the only thing that was ever really changed there. The only thing that we ever made a change to there was the electrical box, because it needed to be updated with a more modern one, because the one that it had was too old and it wasn't exactly for modern times. So it was updated, and ever since that was updated, that's when this place started having very, very strange occurrences. These occurrences even got to the point to where one night, or no, how would I explain this? So around the time I had ended up at the time getting a newer computer at the time that had the next the computer I had before that was had an older operating system, and then newer ones ended up coming out with a newer operating system that was completely different from the old one. So around that time, I ended up with one of those, and starting to like it, getting used to it. And that's when I also started to notice that after a while, every night around the same time, I'd be on the computer. It was, just doing whatever. All of a sudden, I always had this odd feeling that somebody was standing behind me. So I look behind me, no one's there. I thought to myself, all right, that's interesting. Next. Oh, that's not all that happened. So I look, nothing's there. And I was like, okay, whatever. So I go back to doing whatever on the computer. A few minutes later, I get that feeling again. I look, no one's behind me. I said, boy, that's awfully strange, isn't it? That no one's behind me, but it feels like something is there. So, next thing you know, out of nowhere, that happens again. Third time. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. So I finished what I was doing on the computer, went into the bedroom, watched TV for a bit, fell asleep, went to bed, and then got up the next morning. Everything was fine. Now, mind you, there were some nights where I didn't feel like this would happen. Other nights it felt like it did. So then, one time I was at a relative's house, and one night, this was like after I'd moved out of there. So I was at a relative's house one night on the computer, and something similar happened. It felt like I was being watched, like somebody was behind me and nobody was there. I said, whoa, that's very odd. Interesting. Then, all of a sudden, anyway, so I'll go back to what I was just talking about. So, the one place that I lived at for several years before we had moved out of there, every night around the same time, that electrical box, for some reason. Now, if I was sleeping in that bedroom alone, that's when every night around the same time, I'd hear this noise. And for some reason, this noise sounded like someone was actually over at the computer, or not the computer, over at the electrical panel box, sitting there shutting the breakers off. And it had sounded like someone had took a quarter and had threw it over towards the electrical box, and that's where it landed. Or so that's what it sounded like. So I thought, okay. I said, that's odd. And then everything in the room went off. Only in that room, everything had went off. And I was like, wow, that's so weird. So then, all of a sudden, so I obviously flip it back on. It's fine. Or so I thought. Every night around the same time, it would do it again. Now, if I didn't sleep in that room alone, and say someone else was sleeping in there, and then there I was besides, it wouldn't do it. It would only do it when I'd be alone in there. Now that I thought was strange. So then, like I said, finally it got to the point to where after a while, we just ended up moving out of there because that worked out for the best. And then the place we ended up moving into slightly after that was not haunted at all. That was just surrounded by really bad neighbors. So needless to say, due to being surrounded by bad neighbors slightly after, that's why we ended up moving. Then, that's a whole nother thing. We'll get into that probably for next week's episode or whatever. Maybe. Now, it's also hard to say. Now, next week, there may or may not be a guest on. It's hard to say. So, now, please keep in mind to read the disclaimer up above. Thank you. And just remember that before you hit subscribe or want to watch the podcast. I mean, you can feel free to watch the podcast. That's not a big deal. Anyway, now, so another thing, yes, I know this schedule for this is confusing because it just happens at random, but that's all right. So then all of a sudden, next thing you know, so when we had moved out of there, all those things, when we had moved to another place, the bedroom that I had, the electrical panel there was already a more modern one anyway. But that one, that was in a different room in that other trailer. Yes, I used to live in a 1970s mobile home trailer. And then the one I ended up moving out of, that I ended up moving into, only difference was it was just the next year up for the 1970s line of mobile home trailers. So it was just the next year's lineup. That's the only difference. It was just a year newer than the one I was previously living in. And the funny thing is though, even though it was newer, I mean, obviously it was still a 1970s trailer, but it was just the following year up from the one that I was previously living in was the only difference. And it already had the more modern electrical panel box. Yeah. I know, interesting, right? So then, all of a sudden, I don't ever remember having any problems at that place. Well, other than bad neighbors, but that's besides the point. Anyway, like I said, I don't remember having any of those paranormal activity problems there because that all stopped once I had moved. And then in that place that we ended up moving into, so when we had moved into the newer place at the time, so like I said, I'd be on the computer at night doing whatever, and I would literally look behind me to make sure nothing was there or standing there, and then I look and nothing be there. I would literally check behind me just to make sure, and lo and behold, nothing was there. It was just such a good thing. Unlike before in the previous model. So then, so like I said, I had moved slightly after that here and there, and then, I actually, nowadays, actually, I live far away in another home, very far away, and yes, even though where I'm living now is actually currently haunted, it's not, the haunting's not as bad as you think it would be to be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, it's so haunted. No, 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 no. It's actually a slight haunting, like, how would I say this? There's two that haunt this where I'm at now. One is the previous owner, and the other one is not so friendly. One's a female, like an older lady, and the other one is a male. Who I want to say is probably a little younger than the older lady. That one, he's the one you have to watch out for, because he ain't very friendly, that's for sure. Now, he doesn't actually haunt inside of the home. He actually haunts outside of on the property, like outdoors. So that's a whole nother thing. So that's the area of the property that he haunts. Now, the older lady, for example, now, I only seen her one time inside, and that was it. I'm just saying, other than that, I actually have not seen her other than that time. And then, that was it. I just don't know why I only seen her once, and that was it. Couldn't figure that out. So, now, one night, I had went out one day for a couple hours, came home one night, and all of a sudden, this is when I had seen the old lady. So she was sitting at my dining room table area, just like looking at me and looking at me. And I was like, okay. So then that's when she told me about the other spirit, who was a male who was not very friendly. And then, yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. So then one night, I'm, how would I say this? So one night, I'm asleep and I end up having this really strange dream that I am back at this one old property that I used to live at, in that one 1970s mobile home trailer that was a rental property at the time. So I had this really odd dream that I was back there, for God only knows what reason. I don't remember the reason to be exact. But anyway, this is where things got interesting. So all of a sudden, lo and behold, next thing you know, I'm there, and for some reason, I literally see the ground there like suddenly starting to break, because there was literally, I think, like a massive earthquake from what I remember happening in the dream at the time. And all of a sudden, while the ground was actually breaking in my dream from that massive earthquake, all of a sudden, this big hole was there. I'm talking massive. So there was this big, massive hole there, and all of a sudden, this very strange, lurking creature, God only knows what on earth it was just very creepy looking. Ends up coming out of this massive hole, looking around, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, welcome to the podcast. So anyway, and next thing you know, out of nowhere, this creature who lurked up out of the massive hole in the ground, looked right at me, was looking at me. And mind you, I was actually asleep at the time in this dream. This thing looked right at me, and next thing you know, the home that I currently do live in, I'm back in it in the dream, and all of a sudden this thing ends up in my bedroom, goes over to where my bed is, gets up close to my face, looks at me, and says, I'm here, and I'm here, and I've been what's causing all the strange activity on that property, and I've always been there. I just wanted you to know that. I thought to myself, whoa, you have got to be kidding me. Interesting. Oh, that's not all. This thing was so creepy looking, tells me that. I literally wake up like to make sure it's not actually there. And then that was it. The dream was over. I thought to myself, wow, interesting. But come to find out, that specific property was actually at one time used to be an old cemetery. Now, I did not know that for like the longest time till I found that out way after I moved out of there. So all of a sudden, I said to myself, interesting. That's interesting. So whatever was there was from when that property used to be an old cemetery. That's the only thing I could think of why that was actually there. That had to have been. What other explanation could there be? There was a lot of weird things about that property. It was just a very weird setup at the time, Now, that's not all that had happened. A lot of things had happened there. Just some awfully weird, strange things. I honestly, to this day, I actually thought that place was evil. I know. Then, all of a sudden, next thing you know, coming to find out, I was right. That place was actually evil. That land and property. But the place ain't there nowadays. Anyway. Well, the land is there, but the home ain't there anymore. It's long gone. So then, at one point, I had lived in another property not far from there that was also had some strange things happen too, which really did not surprise me any, to be honest with you. So, that was very strange living there too. I lived there for a couple of years, but I ended up moving out of there for lots of reasons, which that'll actually be a whole another episode, which we will get into at some point about that. At one point, I even lived in a really old second-story apartment that at one time that actually used to be a funeral home. Yep, that too. That place was weird and very haunted, badly. There was one time in that apartment where all of a sudden one day, all these quarters literally, suddenly, just decided to start dropping from the ceiling out of nowhere. That was a sign right there that something was very wrong and bad. Now, I had lived there for a little bit and then actually ended up moving out of there because of that and some other reasons, but that was one of them. Just one. But that place was weird. I always felt very odd in there. For some reason, that place, no matter where you were, felt like you were being watched all the time. And that old apartment also used to be a doctor's office. And coming to find out that when that also used to be a doctor's office, the doctor actually passed away in my bedroom. Yeah, I know. In the bedroom that I had, in the bed that where my bed was, the spot I would sleep, is where the doctor actually passed away. I know, ain't that strange? Yeah. So that was strange and weird. One night in that apartment, I remember getting ready for bed. All of a sudden, I happened to glance out because the door was open. I happened to glance out a little bit into the kitchen area because that's where my bedroom was, off the kitchen. All of a sudden, something was standing there, literally looking at me. Well, of course, I had no clue on earth what in the hell it was. I also didn't care. But that was strange too. So then, like I had said, I actually did end up moving again slightly after that into another property. And that's all I wanted to just hop on here and say really quick. Now, there will be more episodes, but what was not covered in this episode will probably be covered in another episode or whatever. And I don't think there was anything else But other than that, and you know what? Um, oh, actually, yes, there is one other thing. So that mobile home trailer, that 1970s trailer that was a rental at the time, when I had moved out of that second story apartment, I actually ended up moving back into that 1970s trailer mobile home that was a rental property for us at the time. Even though I did not want to, at the time I had no choice, I had to, because whatever was in that apartment wasn't very friendly. And that's all I wanted to hop on and say really quick. And I will probably see you all in the next episode. Bye.